The jet's door closed with a soft, final click. Dr. Kendra Holloway stepped into the cabin, her heels silent on the plush carpet. She paused, taking in the sunlight glinting off polished fixtures, the hush of luxury that always felt a little colder than it looked. Jasper, her younger brother, followed, his backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. Evelyn McAllister, the senior flight attendant, stood at the front, her smile wide for the white couple in the first row. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Grant. Champagne?" Her voice was honey. When Kendra and Jasper reached their seats, Evelyn's smile faded. "Good morning," she said, flat and formal. No offer of champagne, no warmth, just a nod, as if checking a box. Jasper glanced at Kendra, his brow furrowing. Kendra met Evelyn's eyes, her own expression calm, unreadable. She sat, smoothing, her skirt, her silence a shield. Evelyn moved on, her heels clicking again, the sound sharper now. Jasper leaned in, voice low. "You see that?" he whispered. "Didn't even look at you." Kendra's lips barely moved. "It's not new." Jasper's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have to get used to it." Kendra looked out the window, the city shrinking below. "Some things you don't get used to, you just learn to carry them. The cabin is filled with quiet, the kind that says everything words can't." Evelyn's laughter drifted back from the front, but it didn't reach their row. Kendra's eyes stayed on the horizon, her dignity unshaken, her silence louder than any protest. The engines began to hum, a low promise of distance. Jasper squeezed her hand once, then let go. The flight had only just begun. Evelyn's cart rolled down the aisle, crystal glasses clinking softly. She poured champagne for the Grants, her voice bright and practiced. "Let me know if you need anything else." The couple smiled, basking in the easy comfort of being seen. When Evelyn reached Kendra and Jasper, her tone changed. "Water's all we have for now." She set 2 plastic cups on their tray table, not meeting Kendra's eyes. Jasper stared at the cart, then at Evelyn. "You just gave them champagne." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "We're out. Sorry." She moved on, her back stiff. Kendra picked up her cup, the water trembling just slightly in her hand. She took a slow sip, her face unreadable. Jasper's fingers drummed on the armrest, frustration simmering. Across the aisle, a businessman glanced over, then quickly looked away. The silence around them grew heavier, filled with things no one wanted to say. Jasper leaned closer, voice tight. "You want me to say something?" Kendra shook her head. "No, not now." Evelyn's laughter floated back from the front, but it sounded forced, brittle. Maya Singh, the junior attendant, hovered nearby, her eyes flicking between Kendra and E. "Evelyn." She hesitated, then quietly placed a napkin on Kendra's tray. A small gesture, almost invisible. Kendra nodded once, a silent thank you. The moment passed, but the weight of it lingered. Jasper muttered, "This is ridiculous." Kendra didn't answer. She just set her cup down, her composure unbroken, her silence a quiet protest. The cabin lights dimmed for takeoff, but the tension stayed bright and sharp, impossible to ignore. Jasper shifted in his seat, his eyes following Evelyn as she moved up the aisle. He caught the businessman across the way watching too, but the man quickly buried his face in a magazine, pretending not to notice. The air felt thick, every small sound amplified by the silence that followed Evelyn's slight. Maya approached, her steps hesitant. She held out a warm towel, her voice barely above a whisper. "Would you like this, ma'am?" Kendra accepted, it with a gentle nod. "Thank you, Maya." Maya's hands trembled as she set the tray down. She glanced at Evelyn, who was busy laughing with the Grants, her back turned to the rest of the cabin. Maya lingered for a moment, as if wanting to say more, but words failed her. She retreated, shoulders hunched. Jasper leaned closer to Kendra, his voice low. "She's scared of her." You can see it. Kendra dabbed her hands, her gaze steady. She's not the only one. A woman in the row behind them coughed, glancing at Kendra, then away. The businessman peeked over his magazine, then shifted, uncomfortably. No one spoke up. No one met Kendra's eyes. Evelyn returned, her smile sharp as glass. Is everything all right here? Kendra looked up, her voice calm. We're fine. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, searching for a challenge that never came. She moved on, her presence leaving a chill in the air. Jasper exhaled. Frustration etched on his face. It's like we're invisible. Kendra folded the towel neatly, placing it on her tray. Not invisible, just not seen the way we should. B. The silence in the cabin grew heavier, judgment and discomfort hanging between every row. Jasper leaned in, his voice barely more than a breath. You're really just going to let her do this? Kendra didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the window, watching clouds drift by. You know how this works, Jess. If I push, I'm the problem. If I wait, I'm just another story. She'll forget. He shook his head, anger simmering. You shouldn't have to wait. You shouldn't have to swallow it. Kendra's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed soft. I'm not swallowing anything. I'm watching. That's different. Evelyn passed by again, her steps slower now, her eyes flicking toward Kendra's row, but never meeting her gaze. She checked seat belts, her hands moving faster than before, her confidence starting to slip. Maya lingered at the galley, watching the exchange. She caught Kendra's eye for a moment, then looked away, guilt and worry written across her face. Jasper's hand hovered over his phone. I could record it. Just one video. People need to see. Kendra shook her head, her voice a whisper. Not yet. Let her show everyone who she is. A beat of silence. The engines roared louder, the plane picking up speed on the runway. Evelyn's laughter from the front sounded thinner, more forced. Jasper leaned back, frustration and helplessness warring in his eyes. Kendra's posture remained steady, her silence a quiet line drawn in the sand. As the jet lifted off, the tension in the cabin rose with it, an invisible boundary drawn between those who saw and those who chose to look away. The jet climbed higher, city lights shrinking below. The cabin was hushed. The only sound was the steady drone of engines and the soft clatter of glasses from the galley. Kendra sat upright, her hands folded in her lap, every muscle held in quiet restraint. Evelyn moved briskly down the aisle, her clipboard clutched tight. She paused at the Grant's row, offering more champagne with a smile that faded when she glanced toward Kendra. Her steps slowed, her confidence flickering in the shadows. Jasper watched her, his fingers drumming on the armrest. She's nervous now, he muttered. She knows she's being watched. Kendra didn't reply. She kept her gaze forward, refusing to give Evelyn the satisfaction of a reaction. Maya approached, her voice soft. Headphones, Dr. Holloway? She slipped them onto Kendra's tray, her hand lingering for a moment. Kendra met her eyes. Thank you, Maya. The words were simple, but the gratitude was real. Maya nodded, relief flickering across her face. She moved away quickly, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to be called back. Evelyn's laughter rang out from the galley, brittle and sharp. The other passengers shifted in their seats, some pretending to sleep, others staring fixedly at their screens. The air was heavy with unspoken judgment. Jasper leaned closer, his voice low. This isn't over. Kendra's lips pressed into a thin line. No, but it started. The jet leveled off, and for a moment everything was still. Kendra closed her eyes, letting the silence settle around her, a silence that was not surrender, but the beginning of something new. The hum of the jet faded into memory as Kendra's mind drifted back to another flight years ago. She was 12, her feet barely touching the floor, sitting beside her mother in first class. The seats were wide, the air thick with quiet judgment, and the world felt impossibly big. Her mother's hand gripped hers tightly, a silent anchor. The Attendant that day moved down the aisle with practiced grace, her smile reserved for the white passengers. "Champagne, sir? Ma'am?" Each glass poured was a performance, each laugh a small exclusion. When she reached Kendra and her mother, the tray lingered, then passed by. No offer, not even a glance. Kendra's mother squeezed her hand harder. "We'll wait," she murmured, her voice steady but tired. Kendra watched the bubbles rise in other people's glasses, her own reflection warped in the polished metal of the tray. She dug her nails into her palm, the sting grounding her in the moment. The attendant smirked, moving on, her indifference sharper than any insult. Around them, no one spoke up. Eyes slid away, conversations resumed, and the silence pressed in. Kendra learned then that some wounds were invisible, that dignity could be etched into memory by the things you endured in silence. Her mother leaned in, whispering, "You hold your head high, baby. They don't get to decide who you are." The words settled deep, a quiet promise that one day things would be different. Back in the present, Kendra blinked, the memory fading as the jet's engines droned on. She glanced at Jasper, who watched her with silent concern. She gave him a small, reassuring nod. The past was never far, but she carried it now with something more than pain. She carried it with purpose. The memory of first class faded, replaced by the present. Evelyn's voice, crisp and dismissive, echoing down the aisle. But even now, fragments of her past clung to her like static. In 2018, Evelyn had rolled her eyes at a black passenger's complaint about being ignored. "They're always so dramatic," she'd whispered to a colleague, her words sharp and careless. The report was marked "resolved" and quietly buried, another invisible scar added to the airline's record. Now, as she moved through the cabin, Evelyn's steps were practiced, her smile automatic. She avoided Kendra's gaze, focusing instead on the passengers who returned her warmth with effortless gratitude. Her prejudice was rehearsed, woven into her routine, unnoticed by those who benefited from it. Jasper watched her, his expression hardening. He nudged Kendra. "She's done this before, hasn't she?" Kendra's reply was quiet, but edged with certainty. "People like her always have." Evelyn paused at the galley, her reflection caught in the polished metal. For a moment, she saw herself as others might, tight-lipped, eyes darting, confidence built on habit, not conviction. She shook it off, pushing the doubt away. A colleague from years ago had once questioned her after a complaint. "Maybe you should listen more, Ev." Evelyn had laughed it off, certain she'd never need to change. She'd always been protected, by silence, by the system's willingness to look the other way. But today, the silence felt different. It was heavier, less forgiving. She sensed eyes on her, not just Kendra's but Maya's, Jasper's, even Harold's. The world was shifting, and for the first time, Evelyn felt the ground beneath her start to move. She straightened her uniform, trying to reclaim her composure. But the echo of her own words, dismissive, careless, lingered, impossible to silence. Lunch service began, and Evelyn moved down the aisle with her usual efficiency. She handed out meals with a smile, setting down warm plates for the Grants, then the businessman across the aisle. When she reached Kendra and Jasper, her hands paused, then she placed a tray in front of Jasper, chicken, steaming and fresh. For Kendra, she set down a plate of cold salad, the dressing missing, the bread stale. Jasper's fist clenched around his fork. "You forgot her meal," he said, voice tight. Evelyn didn't look at him. "That's what was ordered," she replied, her tone flat. Kendra glanced at the plate, then up at Evelyn. "It's fine," she said, voice even. She picked up the fork, unbothered, but her eyes never left Evelyn's face. Evelyn moved on, but her steps were less certain. Across the aisle, Harold Becker shifted in his seat, watching the exchange. He looked away quickly, guilt flickering across his features. He focused on his meal, but his appetite was gone. Jasper leaned closer, whispering, "You want me to call her out?" Kendra shook her head, her voice a whisper. "Let her dig her own grave." The cabin was quiet except for the clink of cutlery. The Grants chatted softly, oblivious or pretending to be. Maya lingered at the back, her face pale, her eyes darting, between Kendra and Evelyn. Evelyn served tea, pouring for everyone but Kendra. When she finally reached their row, she handed Kendra a lukewarm cup, the bag barely steeped. Kendra accepted it with a nod, her dignity undiminished. Jasper's anger simmered, but Kendra's calm held. The snub lingered in the air, a silent accusation no one dared voice. Across the aisle, Harold's silence was a mirror, reflecting the guilt of everyone who chose to look away. Maya lingered at the edge of the galley, her hands trembling as she folded napkins. She watched Evelyn move through the cabin, each slight against Kendra sharper than the last. The injustice gnawed at her, growing heavier with every ignored request and cold glance. When Evelyn wasn't looking, Maya slipped down the aisle with a tray of warm towels. She paused at Kendra's row, her voice soft. "Would you like a towel, Dr. Holloway?" Kendra looked up, surprised by the kindness. "Thank you, Maya." She took the towel, her gratitude silent but sincere. Evelyn shot, Maya a glare from across the cabin, her lips pressed tight. Maya's heart pounded, but she didn't look away. Instead, she moved to the next row, her hands steadier now. Back in the galley, Maya pulled out her phone, fingers shaking as she typed a message to her sister. "I can't stay quiet anymore. It's not right." She stared at the screen, waiting for a reply that didn't come. The message glowed in the darkness, a quiet rebellion burning in her chest. Evelyn entered the galley, her voice sharp. "You're spending a lot of time in the back, Maya. Passengers need you up front." Maya nodded, but she didn't apologize. She tucked her phone away, the decision made. She would not be part of Evelyn's silence anymore. As she returned to the cabin, Maya caught Kendra's eye and gave a tiny, reassuring nod. Kendra's lips curled in the faintest smile, a silent acknowledgement of the risk Maya had taken. The act was small, but it mattered. In the hush of the cabin, Maya's quiet defiance was a spark. For the first time, Evelyn's control felt fragile, her authority undermined not by shouts, but by a simple act of kindness. Jasper's patience finally snapped somewhere over the Atlantic. He watched as Evelyn breezed past again, ignoring Kendra's polite request for headphones. Her reply was a dismissive wave. "We're out," she said, not bothering to check. Jasper's jaw tightened. He glanced at Kendra, who sat quietly, her dignity intact but her patience clearly tested. He slipped his phone from his pocket, angling it discreetly to capture Evelyn's face as she turned away, her annoyance plain for anyone willing to see. Maya, passing by with a tray, caught Jasper's eye. She paused, her voice barely audible. "You should post it," she whispered, glancing at Evelyn's back. "Sometimes the world needs to see." Jasper hesitated, thumb hovering over the record button. He looked at Kendra, searching her face for approval or warning. She met his gaze, her eyes tired but resolute. She didn't nod, didn't shake her head, just held his stare for a moment, then looked away. He hit a record. Evelyn's voice drifted, back as she bantered with the Grants, her laughter brittle. Jasper caught the moment she turned, her face slipping from polite to impatient, as she brushed off another request from Kendra. The camera caught it all, the tone, the body language, the way other passengers pretended not to notice. Maya stood near the galley, watching. When Jasper finished, she leaned in. "Post it," she said again, firmer this time. Jasper's hand shook as he uploaded the clip, the weight of what he'd done heavy in his chest. He glanced at Kendra, who closed her eyes and let out a slow, silent breath. The phone vibrated almost immediately, likes, shares, comments piling up. Jasper set it down, the cabin suddenly feeling smaller, the air charged with something new. One quiet video, a single tap, and everything began to change. The cabin was hushed, but the silence was different now. Electric, expectant. Passengers glanced at their phones, screens lighting up with notifications. A teenager in 12B gasped, nudging her mother. "Mom, look at this! That's our flight!" The mother's eyes widened as she watched the video Jasper had posted. Her lips pressed in a tight, worried line. Evelyn moved down the aisle, her step suddenly uncertain. She noticed the glances, the way conversations faded as she passed. Her practiced smile faltered. Someone near the back whispered, "That's her," and the words rippled forward, a wave of quiet judgment. Jasper watched the reactions, heart pounding. He glanced at Kendra, who sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at the screens, didn't react to the whispers. Her composure was a shield, but Jasper could see the tension in her jaw, the way she gripped, the armrest just a little tighter. Maya checked her phone, her eyes going wide. "It's everywhere," she whispered, barely audible. She caught Kendra's eye, nodding once, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. Evelyn stopped at the galley, her face pale. She pulled out her own phone, scrolling through the flood of comments. "This is why my mom hates flying," read one, attached to a clip of her brushing off Kendra. Another, "How many times has this happened before?" The air in the cabin shifted. Passengers who had ignored the earlier slights now stared openly, some with sympathy, others with shame. The tension was no longer just between Kendra and Evelyn. It had spread, infecting everyone on board. Jasper's phone buzzed again. "Service denied" was trending. He glanced at Kendra, who met his gaze with a steady, unspoken gratitude. The truth was out, and there was no pulling it back. Far above the clouds, the fallout from the cabin was already reaching the ground. In a glass-walled boardroom, Gloria Chen sat at the head of a long table, her phone buzzing non-stop. She tried to focus on the agenda, but the trending hashtag kept flashing across her screen. And service denied. The PR director leaned in, voice tense. "We have a problem, Gloria. It's gone viral." Gloria scrolled through the comments, her face tightening as she saw the video. Evelyn's dismissive wave, Kendra's quiet dignity, the uncomfortable silence of the other passengers. She remembered a meeting just months ago, a South Asian pilot sitting across from her, voice trembling as he described being ignored and belittled. Gloria had waved it off. "Focus on loyalty, not drama," she'd said, eager to move on. Now, the room was silent except for the hum of phones and the occasional cough. The head of HR cleared his throat. "There are old complaints resurfacing, not just Evelyn. This could get ugly." Gloria's hands trembled as she typed a message to PR. "Contain this. Issue a statement. Blame miscommunication." But even as she sent it, she knew it wouldn't be enough. The story had slipped beyond her control. She looked around the table, searching for support, but found only wary eyes and crossed arms. The board members, once eager to please, now watched her with suspicion. The silence was thick, judgmental. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification, another story from a former employee, another crack in the wall she'd built to keep the truth out. Gloria pressed her lips together, feeling the ground shift beneath her. For the first time, she realized the silence she'd relied on was gone. The world was watching, and there was nowhere left to hide. Captain Simon Rourke sat in the cockpit, the glow of the instrument panel casting shadows across his face. His co-pilot scrolled through notifications, eyes wide. "It's everywhere, Simon. The video. The company group chat is blowing up." Rourke's jaw tightened as he read the messages. Passengers, crew, even former pilots weighing in. He remembered his first years flying, when he'd been told, "Keep your head down, don't get involved." But this was different. He'd seen the way Evelyn treated some passengers, always subtle, always deniable. He told himself it wasn't his place. Now the world was watching, and silence felt like complicity. He stood, smoothing his uniform, and stepped into the cabin. Evelyn was at the galley, her face pale, hands shaking as she tried to pour another glass of champagne. She looked up, startled. "Captain?" Rourke's voice was steady, but there was steel in it. "Dr. Holloway, may I speak with you for a moment?" Kendra looked up, surprised. The cabin fell silent, all eyes on them. Rourke met her gaze. "My cockpit is yours, ma'am. If there's anything you need, you have my full support." The words rippled through the plane. Evelyn's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Maya's eyes filled with relief. Jasper sat up straighter, pride in his sister and the man who finally spoke. Rourke turned to the passengers. "We expect everyone to be treated with respect on this flight. That's not negotiable." He returned to the cockpit, heart pounding. For the first time, he felt he'd done the right thing, even if it meant breaking an unspoken rule. Evelyn stood frozen, her authority slipping away, the power she'd wielded for years dissolving in the face of quiet, public truth. Harold Becker sat rigid in his seat, the video replaying on his phone. He watched Evelyn's dismissive gesture, Kendra's composed silence, and felt a knot tighten in his chest. For years, Harold had flown this route, always greeted with smiles, always served first. He'd noticed the small slights, the moments, when others were overlooked, but he'd told himself it wasn't his business. Now, as the whispers grew and the hashtag trended, Harold couldn't escape the truth. He looked across the aisle at Kendra, her face calm but eyes distant. Jasper caught Harold's glance, holding it for a moment. A silent challenge. Harold cleared his throat, the sound loud in the tense cabin. He leaned toward Jasper, voice low but clear. "I saw it all. I should have said something sooner." Jasper's eyes widened in surprise, then softened. "It's not too late." Harold nodded, swallowing hard. He turned to the people around him, passengers who had always looked to him for cues, for how to act, for what to ignore. "She's telling the truth," he said louder this time. "I watched it happen." The words hung in the air, heavier than any accusation. Other passengers shifted, some nodding, some looking away in shame. Evelyn froze mid-step, her face draining of color. Kendra met Harold's eyes, offering a small, grateful nod. For the first time, the silence in the cabin broke, not with anger, but with a quiet, collective reckoning. Harold sat back, his hands trembling. He realized that complicity wasn't just about what you did, but what you allowed. The confession, soft but seismic, marked the first crack in Evelyn's wall of enablers. Outside, the sky stretched endless and clear, as if daring everyone on, bored to finally see what had always been there. The cabin lights dimmed as the flight edged into night. Maya lingered in the galley, her hands shaking as she scrolled through old emails on her phone. Each message was a memory she'd tried to ignore, complaints from passengers of color, stories that sounded so much like Kendra's. She found one from a year ago. "Attendant dismissed me, said I was imagining things." Another, flagged but never answered. "No one listened." Maya's breath caught. She remembered Evelyn laughing off every complaint, telling her, "Don't worry, Maya, some people just like to make trouble." Maya had nodded, wanting to keep her job, but the words had always felt wrong. Now, with the cabin hushed and the world watching, Maya couldn't hide behind fear anymore. She selected the damning emails, Evelyn's dismissals, Gloria's quick replies. Handled. No follow-up needed. Her thumb hovered over the forward button, heart pounding. She typed Kendra's email address, subject line, proof. For a moment she hesitated, thinking about rent, about her family, about what might happen if she pressed send. Then she remembered Kendra's calm, the way she'd thanked her for a simple towel, the quiet dignity that had filled the cabin and made Maya feel seen. She hit send. The message left her outbox, the screen glowing in the darkness. It felt like pulling the pin on a grenade, dangerous, irreversible, but necessary. Maya wiped her eyes, steeling herself. She stepped back into the aisle, her shoulders squared. As she passed Kendra's row, she met her gaze and gave a small, determined nod. Kendra's phone buzzed quietly. She opened the message, her eyes widening as she read. For the first time that night, hope flickered in her expression. Maya returned to the galley, her fear replaced by something stronger: resolve. Evelyn stood near the galley, her hands trembling, as she fumbled with a champagne bottle. The glass slipped, shattering on the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the cabin. Heads turned, eyes narrowing. The polished facade she had worn so carefully was beginning to crack. A passenger near the front, voice steady but firm, called out, "We'll wait." The words hung in the air, a quiet echo of Kendra's calm defiance. Laughter rippled softly through the cabin, muffled but unmistakable. Evelyn's breath hitched. She wiped her hands on her uniform, but the tremor didn't stop. Her eyes darted to the windows, then to the rows of passengers who no longer saw her as in control. She backed. Into the galley, the space suddenly too small, too confining. Her chest tightened, breath shallow and rapid. The weight of countless ignored complaints, buried truths, and now public exposure pressed down on her. A crew member passed by, avoiding her gaze. The silence was louder than any confrontation. Evelyn sank onto a stool, head in her hands. The years of subtle power, the whispered slights, the hidden protections, all unraveling in this cramped corner. Outside, the cabin buzzed with quiet conversations, the energy shifting toward something new: accountability, recognition, change. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages from the airline's legal team, from PR, from former colleagues who now kept their distance. She stared at the screen, the words blurring. Her reign was over. In the dim light, Evelyn's shoulders shook, a silent surrender, a collapse not of words but of spirit. The galley door opened briefly, a passenger's voice asking for assistance. Evelyn didn't respond. The moment stretched, heavy and final. The plane began its slow descent, city lights flickering through the windows. In row 14, Jasper's phone buzzed. A new message. He glanced at the screen, recognizing the name, Talia Brooks, reporter. He showed it to Kendra, who read the preview. "Your story could change everything." Attached was a draft article, headline bold and unflinching. "Dignity isn't given. It's taken." Jasper scrolled through the text, quotes from passengers, screenshots of the viral video, a timeline of complaints the airline had buried for years. Talia's message was short: "I need your statement before we land. The world is watching." Jasper looked at Kendra, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Do you want to say anything?" Kendra took a deep breath. "Tell her the truth. No speeches, just what happened." Jasper typed, his fingers shaking. "We asked for respect. We waited. She showed us who she was. The rest of the world finally saw it too." He hit send, his heart pounding. The phone vibrated again. Talia's reply. "Thank you. I'll make sure your voice is heard." As the landing gear lowered, the mood in the cabin shifted. Passengers glanced at Kendra and Jasper, some nodding quietly, others looking away, ashamed of their earlier silence. Evelyn remained hidden in the galley, her authority gone. Maya stood near the exit, her posture straightener, eyes brighter. Jasper looked at his sister, pride and relief mingling in his gaze. Kendra stared out the window, the city below a blur of lights and possibility. The plane touched down, the moment of impact gentle but unmistakable. For the first time, Kendra felt the weight of waiting begin to lift. Talia's article would go live before they even reached the gate. The story was no longer theirs alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever waited for justice. The jet door opened with a hydraulic hiss, sunlight flooding the cabin. Dr. Kendra Holloway paused at the threshold, aviator sunglasses hiding her eyes but not the set of her jaw. Below, a wall of cameras clicked and whirred, reporters shouting questions that dissolved into static. She descended the stairs, each step deliberate, her posture daring anyone to question her place here. Evelyn McAllister followed, her uniform pristine but her face pale, breaths shallow. The clipboard in her hands trembled, papers rustling like dry leaves. She kept her gaze fixed on Kendra's back. as if anchoring herself to the woman she'd underestimated. A reporter shoved a mic forward. "Dr. Holloway, is it true you own the airline?" Kendra didn't break stride. "You'll hear everything shortly." Evelyn's heel caught on the last step. She stumbled, the clipboard slipping from her grip. Papers scattered across the tarmac, skidding toward the crowd. A photographer crouched, capturing her frozen stare, wide-eyed, exposed, as Kendra turned to face her. The cameras surged. "Ms. McAllister, why'd you deny her service?" Evelyn opened her mouth, but no sound came. Kendra's silence was a vice, tightening with every second. Jasper emerged behind them, phone still recording. He scooped up a stray paper, a flight manifest, and handed it to Evelyn without a word. She took it, her fingers brushing his, and flinched as if burned. Maya Singh lingered at the jet's door, watching. A crew member nudged her. "You coming?" "In a minute," she said, voice steady. Kendra reached the podium, the airline's logo looming behind her. She removed her sunglasses, eyes sweeping the crowd. The shouts died to a hush. Evelyn stood apart, papers clutched to her chest. The distance between her and Kendra stretched, vast and unbridgeable, a chasm of choices, made and ignored. A child's voice pierced the quiet. "Mommy, why's everyone mad at that lady?" No one answered. Kendra leaned into the mic. "Today isn't about me. It's about everyone who's ever been told to wait." The crowd erupted. Evelyn's breath hitched, the truth settling over her like ash. The crowd stilled as Kendra stood at the podium, her presence commanding the space. Reporters jostled for position, microphones thrust forward, but she didn't rush. She glanced back at the jet, then at Evelyn, who hovered on the edge of the tarmac, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Kendra's voice rang out, steady and clear. "You denied me service on my own plane." The words fell heavy, each syllable, deliberate. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment Evelyn's world shifted. A gasp rippled through the press. Evelyn's clipboard slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the concrete. She stood frozen, wide-eyed, exposed for all to see. A photographer caught her in that instant, her face a portrait of disbelief and unraveling certainty. Jasper stepped forward, picking up a page and handing it back to Evelyn. She took it with trembling fingers, her eyes darting between Kendra and the crowd. For the first time, she was the one on display, every misstep magnified. A reporter's voice cut through the silence. "Dr. Holloway, how long have you owned the airline?" Kendra met the question head-on. Long enough to know what dignity should look like at 30,000 feet. Her gaze never left Evelyn, the truth unmistakable. Evelyn tried to speak, her lips parting, but no words came. The crowd's attention shifted from Kendra's calm to Evelyn's collapse, the power dynamic reversed in a single sentence. Maya stepped off the jet, standing quietly behind Kendra. Other crew members watched, some nodding, others stepping away from Evelyn's orbit. The silence between Kendra and Evelyn was thick, louder than any accusation. Reporters scribbled furiously, the story already writing itself. Evelyn's shoulders slumped, her clipboard now just a handful of scattered excuses. The spotlight had shifted, and for the first time she had nowhere left to hide. Evelyn stood rooted to the tarmac, clipboard half empty, eyes darting from Kendra to the sea of reporters. The shock of exposure left her speechless, her mind scrambling for a defense that wouldn't come. She finally managed a stammer, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know." Kendra's reply was calm, her tone unwavering. "That's the problem. You never ask. You just assume." The words cut through the air, sharp and final, echoing across the crowd and into every recording device pointed their way. A hush fell. The line was instantly picked up by a reporter near the front, who repeated it into her mic for the live feed. "You just assume," she said, her eyes never leaving Evelyn. The phrase began to ripple through the crowd, a rallying cry for every traveler who'd ever been overlooked, dismissed or made to feel small. Evelyn's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked down at her shoes, the ground suddenly unsteady beneath her. Behind her, a crew member whispered to another, "She's always done this, just never to the wrong person before." Jasper watched, his phone still recording, capturing. The moment Evelyn's certainty crumbled. Maya, standing quietly behind Kendra, felt a surge of relief and vindication. Reporters pressed in, but Kendra didn't move. She let the silence do its work, her presence a quiet rebuke to every assumption Evelyn had ever made. Evelyn's hands shook, her clipboard now nothing but a prop. She glanced at the jet, at the crowd, at the colleagues who no longer met her eyes. The weight of her choices settled on her shoulders, heavy and inescapable. The crowd began to murmur, the phrase looping through the air and onto social media. You just assume. It was no longer just Kendra's story, it belonged to everyone who'd ever been made invisible by someone else's certainty. Maya stood near the edge of the tarmac, her heart pounding as she watched the scene unfold. For months, she'd kept her head down, doing her job, avoiding trouble. But now, as she saw Evelyn shrinking under the weight of Kendra's words, something inside her shifted. She took a shaky breath and walked toward Kendra, the crowd parting slightly as she approached. Her hands trembled, but her voice was clear. "I'm done hiding," Maya said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words hung in the air, simple but undeniable. Evelyn turned, eyes wide, as if seeing Maya for the first time. "Maya, don't," she started, but her voice faltered. Maya shook her head. "No, I watched you treat people like they were less than you. I stayed quiet because I was scared, but not anymore." She looked at Kendra, her gaze steady. "I saw what happened. I know the truth." A ripple moved through the crew. One attendant stepped back from Evelyn, arms crossed. Another nodded at Maya, relief on her face. Even the ground staff paused, sensing the shift in the air. Kendra met Maya's, eyes gratitude and respect passing silently between them. Jasper lowered his phone, capturing the moment Maya stood tall. No longer in the background, reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zooming in on Maya's face. A microphone caught her next words. "It's time people like us are seen too." Evelyn tried to speak, but her voice was lost in the growing murmur of the crowd. Her authority, once absolute, was slipping away with every word Maya spoke. Maya stepped beside Kendra, her shoulders squared. The act was small, but in that moment, it was everything. A line drawn, a new beginning. The crowd watched, the silence, now filled with possibility. Loyalty was shifting, and Evelyn felt it, her power unraveling, replaced by something she could no longer control. Harold Becker stood at the edge of the crowd, his hands clenched tightly around his briefcase. For years, he'd flown this airline, always treated with respect, always first in line for every comfort. He'd seen the slights, the moments when others were overlooked, but he'd told himself it wasn't his place to interfere. Now, watching Evelyn falter and Maya step forward, Harold felt the weight of his silence. He cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the murmurs. Reporters turned, cameras swiveling to catch his face. He took a step forward, his voice steady but quiet. "I saw it all," he said, looking directly at the press, then at Kendra. "She's telling the truth." A hush fell over the group. Evelyn's hand flew to her necklace, gripping it so hard her knuckles whitened. She looked at Harold, betrayal and fear flickering across her face. Harold continued, his words measured. "I've been on this flight for years. I've seen things I should have spoken up about. I didn't. That was my mistake." Other passengers shifted, some nodding, others looking away in shame. The tide was turning, not with outrage, but with the quiet, undeniable truth of someone finally breaking ranks. Jasper caught Harold's eye, offering a nod of respect. Maya exhaled, relief visible in her posture. Kendra gave Harold a small, grateful smile, her dignity undiminished. Evelyn's composure crumbled. She stepped back, her privilege slipping through her fingers like sand. The crowd's judgment was silent but absolute, and for the first time, Evelyn was alone. The cameras caught every detail: Harold's confession, Evelyn's unraveling, the shifting faces of the crew and passengers. The story was no longer just about one woman's injustice. It was about all the moments people had chosen silence over truth. The tide had turned, and there was no going back. Talia Brooks stood just beyond the crowd, her phone held high, broadcasting every second to thousands watching live. Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted between Kendra, Evelyn, and the shifting crowd. "This isn't an accident. It's a pattern," she narrated, her words crisp and direct. "Today the world saw what's been hidden in plain sight." Evelyn's composure finally broke. She tried to speak, but her voice faltered, lost beneath the hum of notifications and the steady stream of comments flooding Talia's feed. "Fire her," one viewer posted. Another, "Kendra for CEO." The airline stock ticker, visible in a corner of the screen, began to dip as the story spread. Talia zoomed in, capturing every detail. Kendra's calm, Maya's courage, Harold's confession, and Evelyn's unraveling. The camera lingered on Evelyn's face, her eyes darting, her lips pressed into a thin, desperate line. The power she once held was gone, replaced by the cold scrutiny of a watching world. A reporter from another network stepped closer, asking, "Ms. McAllister, do you have anything to say?" Evelyn shook her head, unable to find words. The silence was louder than any denial. Talia turned her camera back to Kendra. "Dr. Holloway, what do you want people to remember from today?" Kendra's answer was quiet but unwavering. "That dignity isn't a privilege. It's a right. For everyone." The words echoed through the feed, quickly clipped and shared across platforms. Viewers responded with hearts, applause, and more calls for accountability. Jasper watched the numbers climb, realizing the moment had become bigger than any one person. Maya squeezed Kendra's hand, her relief and pride visible. Talia ended the feed with a final shot of the crowd, silent, changed, and bearing witness. The truth was out, and the world was watching. There would be no more hiding. Across the tarmac, inside a towering glass building, Gloria Chen sat in a leather chair that suddenly felt too big. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. News alerts, texts from board members, panicked messages from the PR team. She watched the live feed on her office screen, Evelyn's unraveling and Kendra's calm replaying in a loop. The hashtag "service denied" was everywhere, and the airline stock graph dipped lower with every passing minute. A senior board member entered, his face grim. He closed the door quietly, the hush in the room thick with accusation. "Gloria, we need to talk," he said, his voice low. "This is a disaster. The complaints, the cover-ups, they're all coming out now." Gloria tried to steady her hands, but her lipstick smeared as she wiped sweat from her upper lip. "We can issue a statement. Say it was a misunderstanding. Offer training." He cut her off. "It's too late for that. The board is meeting in an hour. If you don't step down, we'll vote you out." She stared at him, realization dawning. The power she'd wielded for years, her ability to silence dissent, to bury uncomfortable truths, was gone. Her phone buzzed again, another notification, another demand for accountability from staff, passengers, the public. Outside, the crowd on the tarmac grew, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing. Gloria watched as Kendra's words scrolled across the bottom of the news feed. "Dignity isn't a privilege, it's right." For a moment, Gloria saw herself reflected in the dark screen, polished, poised, and now utterly alone. The silence, in the boardroom, was suffocating. She looked down at her resignation letter, fingers trembling. The world she'd controlled so carefully was collapsing, and there was nothing left to do but let go. The boardroom, once her domain, now felt like a cage. Captain Simon Rourke stood at the edge of the tarmac, hat in hand, watching the aftermath unfold. The crowd's attention was fixed on Kendra and Evelyn, but Simon's gaze was steady, thoughtful. He'd flown with Evelyn for years, watched her wield authority with a smile that didn't always reach her eyes. He'd told himself it wasn't his place to interfere, but today, that excuse felt hollow. He approached Kendra, the sun glinting off his captain's bars. The cameras shifted, catching the moment. Simon stopped in front of her, meeting her eyes with quiet respect. Without a word, he removed his hat and offered it to her. "Your plane, ma'am," he said, voice calm and certain. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of the entire day. Crew members watched, some with pride, others with regret. Maya's eyes filled with tears, relief and hope mingling in her expression. Jasper filmed the moment, knowing it would mean something to people far beyond this runway. Evelyn, standing a few feet away, saw the exchange. Her face fell, the realization dawning that even the cockpit, her last bastion of authority, had turned away. She looked down, her hands twisting the edge of her uniform, powerless to stop what was happening. The crowd murmured, the hashtag #PassTheWheel already spreading online. Reporters snapped photos, capturing the image of Simon's gesture. One leader stepping aside, another stepping forward. Kendra accepted the hat, her grip steady. "Thank you, Captain," she replied, her voice carrying across the tarmac. Simon nodded, stepping back, his role in the story complete. He'd made his choice, quietly but unmistakably, and the ripple would be felt long after the cameras stopped rolling. The moment was brief, but it marked a shift, a new order, built not on silence, but on respect. The air on the tarmac grew still, the crowd's energy shifting from chaos to a charged, watchful silence. Reporters lowered their microphones. Passengers gathered in small clusters, and airline staff stood at a distance, arms folded, eyes fixed on Evelyn. No one jeered, no one cheered. The absence of noise was its own kind of judgment. Evelyn lingered by the steps of the jet, her shoulders hunched, eyes searching for any sign of support. Crew members who once greeted her with deference now looked away, their loyalty quietly withdrawn. Even the ground staff, who had always followed her orders without question, avoided her gaze. A mother held her child's hand, whispering, "That's the woman from the video." The child nodded, watching Evelyn with wide, unblinking eyes. The lesson was unspoken, but it settled into the crowd like a stone dropped in water. Actions have consequences, even for those who once seemed untouchable. Harold stood with the other passengers, his confession still echoing in the heavy air. He didn't look at Evelyn, but his presence was a reminder. Silence could no longer protect her. Maya remained near Kendra, her posture proud. The staff around her seemed to draw closer, forming a quiet circle of support. Kendra stood at the center, her calm presence a new axis for the group. Evelyn's isolation became tangible, a physical space no one dared to cross. She clutched her clipboard, the papers inside now meaningless. Her authority, once absolute, had evaporated in the face of collective silent rejection. The cameras captured it all, the looks, the distance, the way the crowd parted around Kendra and closed behind Evelyn. The verdict was delivered not with words but with the simple act of turning away. As the sun dipped lower, the silence lingered, a final, unmistakable condemnation. Kendra stepped forward, the crowd parting as she approached the line of microphones. The setting sun cast a warm glow across the tarmac, catching in her hair and glinting off the captain's hat she still held. Reporters leaned in, their pens poised, but Kendra didn't rush. She looked out over the faces, some hopeful, some ashamed, all waiting for what she would say. She paused, letting the silence settle. Jasper stood behind her, Maya at her side, both watching with quiet pride. Evelyn lingered at the edge of the crowd, her eyes fixed on the ground, her presence now barely noticed. Kendra's voice was clear, steady, carrying farther than any shout. "Dignity isn't a privilege, it's right." The words hung in the air, simple and unyielding. Cameras flashed, and the phrase was instantly picked up, typed, tweeted, repeated by anchors and activists alike. She looked at Evelyn, not with anger, but with a calm that spoke of battles fought long before this day. Everyone deserves to be seen, to be heard, to be treated as human. A reporter asked, "What do you want to happen next?" Kendra met the question with a gentle firmness. "I want this to be the last time someone feels invisible in a space they paid to enter. I want the silence to end, not just here, but everywhere." The crowd was quiet, the weight of her words settling over them. Jasper squeezed her shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. Maya wiped away a tear, her relief and hope mirrored in the faces of the staff around her. Behind Kendra, the jet's tail logo gleamed in the fading light. Evelyn glanced up at it, her career now a footnote to a story, much bigger than herself. Kendra stepped back, her final words echoing, "Dignity is a right." The world listened and, for once, truly heard. Night settles over the city as Evelyn sits alone at her kitchen table, the glow of her phone the only light in the room. She scrolls through old photos, group dinners, smiling faces, moments when she belonged. Each swipe brings another memory, another reminder of how quickly things have changed. Her inbox, once overflowing with invitations and updates, is now silent. No new messages, no notifications. She opens her text thread with a former colleague, typing a greeting, then deleting it before sending. The emptiness is louder than any argument. Her phone vibrates, just a calendar reminder she forgot to turn off. She sighs, replaying the viral video for the 100th time. Her own voice echoes back, brittle and sharp. "We're out. Sorry." The words sting now, each syllable heavier than the last. Evelyn scrolls through her social media, watching as her followers dwindle, comments piling up, some angry, some disappointed, many just silent. She clicks on a group chat, only to find she's been removed. The realization settles in. The world she trusted to protect her has quietly closed its doors. She sets her phone down, staring at her reflection on the black screen. The silence in her apartment is absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. She remembers the days when her phone never stopped buzzing, when her presence was expected, her opinions sought after. Now all she has is the echo of her own words, replaying in a loop she can't escape. Evelyn closes her eyes, the weight of isolation pressing in. For the first time she understands what it means to be unseen. Morning light spills through the window as Evelyn steps into her neighborhood coffee shop, hoping for a taste of routine. She stands in line, hands tucked into her sleeves, watching the barista greet regulars by name. When it's her turn, the barista glances up, eyes flickering with recognition before settling into practiced neutrality. "Name for the cup?" he asks, pen poised. Evelyn hesitates, surprised. He used to know her order by heart, used to smile and chat about weekend plans. Now she gives her name in a quiet voice, feeling the distance in the simple exchange. She moves to the pickup counter, pulling out her phone. She checks her group chats, one for the flight crew, another for the local book club. Both are gone. She scrolls through her contacts, noticing the absence of familiar green dots. She tries to text a former colleague, but the message bounces back. "User not available." As she waits, she glances around the shop. A woman she once called a friend catches her eye, then quickly looks away, focusing on her laptop. Another regular, who always shared a table, shifts his chair, creating a little more space between them. Her name is called, and she takes her coffee, the cup marked with a misspelled version. She sits by the window, stirring her drink, watching the world move on without her. Outside, people laugh and talk, unaware of the ache settling in Evelyn's chest. She sips her coffee, the taste suddenly unfamiliar. The shop, once a place of comfort, feels foreign now, a reminder that she's become a stranger in her own world. Evelyn stares into her cup, the silence around her louder than any accusation. Gloria. Chen sat at the end of a long, polished table, the boardroom colder than she remembered. The directors filed in, faces stern, eyes hard, folders stacked before them, each marked with dates and names, evidence of complaints she'd once brushed aside. A director cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "We've reviewed the files. Years of ignored warnings, Gloria, buried reports. Passengers and staff who trusted you to listen." Gloria's hands trembled as she opened her folder, scanning the familiar documents. She remembered each one. Dismissed. With a signature, a quick email, a promise to handle it quietly. Now, every page felt like a verdict. Another director spoke, voice flat. "We trusted you. You let us down." Gloria tried to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. She looked around the table, searching for an ally, but found only folded arms and cold stares. The silence was heavy, broken only by the shuffle of papers and the ticking of the wall clock. The board chair finally spoke. "We're moving forward. With new leadership, you'll be notified of next steps." Gloria nodded, unable to meet their eyes. She gathered her things, the weight of her choices pressing down on her shoulders. The boardroom, once her domain, now felt like a place of exile. As a bee, she left, her footsteps echoed down the hall. She glanced back at the closed door, realizing she'd been shut out not just from power, but from the trust she'd taken for granted. Outside, the city buzzed with news of change. Inside, Gloria's world had grown small, defined by silence and regret. The newsroom was packed, cameras trained on the podium where the airline's CEO stood, somber and composed. The air buzzed with anticipation, journalists murmuring as the broadcast began. On screens across the country, employees and passengers watched, waiting for answers. The CEO cleared his throat, glancing at the rows of reporters. "We have failed to uphold our promise of dignity and respect for every customer and employee. Recent events have made it clear that our culture must change." He paused, letting the words settle. "Effective immediately, we are instituting mandatory bias training for all staff. We're overhauling our complaints process, making it transparent and accountable. And we will publish regular reports on our progress, publicly." A reporter raised her hand. "Why did it take so long?" The CEO's gaze was steady. "We were wrong. We listened to the wrong voices, ignored the right ones. That ends today." He continued, "We are deeply sorry to those who were hurt, ignored, or silenced. You deserved better. We will do better." The press conference ended with a single, unvarnished line. "We failed. We will do better." Screens flickered with the news, the CEO's words looping on social media feeds. In break rooms and living rooms, people watched in silence. Some skeptical, some hopeful, all aware that something fundamental had shifted. In the quiet that followed, the promise of change hung in the air. The company's future was uncertain, but for the first time it felt like the right people were finally being heard. Maya sat alone in a small office, sunlight streaming through the window and warming her shoulders. She stared at the envelope. On the desk, her name printed neatly in bold letters. Her hands shook as she opened it, unfolding the letter inside. The words, "Promotion Senior Flight Attendant," jumped out at her, and for a moment she just stared, hardly believing it was real. She remembered the day on the tarmac, standing beside Kendra, speaking up when it mattered. The fear, the trembling, the risk she'd taken. Now, that moment felt like the first step in a new journey. Her new badge glinted in the sunlight as she pinned it to her uniform. Maya smiled, thinking of the passengers she'd serve, the crew she'd support, and the example she'd set. She thought of her family, her sister who texted back after everything went public. "I'm proud of you. You made a difference." A gentle knock at the door broke her thoughts. A supervisor peeked in, smiling. "Congratulations, Maya. You earned this." Maya nodded, her heart full. "Thank you. I wanted to do the right thing." "You did," the supervisor said. "And you showed others they could too." As the door closed, Maya looked at her reflection in the window. She saw not just herself, but every person who'd ever felt invisible. Every moment of quiet courage that had led to this day. She stood, straightened her shoulders, and walked out of the office, ready to step into her new role, determined to make sure no one on her watch ever felt unseen again. Kendra and Jasper stepped into the bustling airport terminal, the sound of rolling suitcases and boarding calls filling the air. For the first time, Kendra felt the weight of eyes on her, not as judgment, but as recognition. Staff at the check-in counter nodded respectfully. A security guard offered a quiet, "Welcome back, Dr. Holloway," his tone genuine. As they made their way through the crowd, passengers paused, some whispering, others simply watching. A young woman with a stroller offered a shy smile. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above the noise. Kendra nodded, her dignity shining in the simple exchange. Near the gate, a child tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing at Kendra. "That's her, isn't it?" The mother smiled, pride and gratitude in her eyes. "Yes, that's her." Jasper grinned, nudging his sister. "You're famous now." Kendra shook her head, a small smile breaking through. Not famous, just seen. As they walked, a group of airline employees gathered near the entrance, clapping softly. The applause wasn't loud or showy, but it was real, an acknowledgement of what Kendra had endured and what she'd changed. Maya stood among them, her new badge gleaming, her smile wide with pride. Kendra paused, letting the moment wash over her. She realized this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who'd ever been overlooked, every quiet act of courage that had gone unnoticed. Jasper squeezed her hand. "You did good, sis." Kendra looked around, her heart full. For the first time in a long while, she felt at home in her own skin, her presence rewriting the space around her. The days that followed were a blur of headlines and hashtags. Social media lit up with stories. Passengers, crew, and strangers sharing their own moments of silent injustice. Some posted photos from flights where they'd been ignored. Others wrote about times they'd spoken up and been dismissed. Each story added another thread to the tapestry of change. The hashtag "seen because of her" trended for days. One post read, "I watched Kendra stand tall and realized I could too." Another, "Maya's courage gave me the strength to report what I saw." The stories poured in from airports across the country, each one a ripple spreading outward. Kendra scrolled through the messages late at night, her heart heavy and hopeful all at once. She read about a young man who finally confronted a supervisor, a mother who taught her daughter to speak up, a retired pilot who apologized for years of silence. Maya's inbox is filled with thank you notes and job offers from other airlines. She replied to each one, encouraging others to keep pushing for change. Jasper posted a video thanking everyone for their support, his words honest and raw. "This isn't just about us. It's about all of you who have waited, watched, and wondered if things could ever be different." Even Evelyn's name appeared in the stories, not as a villain but as a warning. Her actions became a lesson, her silence a cautionary tale. The movement grew, fueled by the voices of those who had once been quiet. For the first time, it felt like the world was listening, and in every story, Kendra's quiet dignity echoed. A reminder that sometimes it only takes one person being seen for everyone else to find their voice. Late one evening, Kendra sat alone in her office, the city lights twinkling beyond the glass. Her inbox was full. News requests, thank you notes, invitations to speak. She scrolled past them, pausing when a new message appeared with the subject line, "Thank you." She opened it, expecting another journalist or colleague. Instead, it was from a young black girl named Brielle. The message was short, but every word landed with weight. "I watched what happened to you. I used to feel small at school, like I had to shrink to fit in. But you showed me how to own my space. Thank you for being brave." Kendra read the message again, her eyes stinging with tears she hadn't let herself feel until now. She thought of her own childhood, the first-class flight with her mother, the years of being told to wait, to be quiet, to not make trouble. She thought of Maya's courage, Jasper's support, and the strangers who had found their voices because she refused to lose hers. She typed a reply, her fingers trembling. "You never have to shrink for anyone. You belong everywhere you stand." Kendra leaned back, letting the moment settle. The noise of the world faded, replaced by a quiet validation, that reached deeper than any headline or applause. For every battle fought in silence, for every time. She'd wondered if it was worth it. This message was her answer. She looked out at the city, hope flickering in her chest. Change was slow, but it was real, and it started with being seen. Kendra stood at her office window, the city stretching, out beneath a sky streaked with the last light of evening. Her reflection hovered in the glass, layered over the world she'd helped change. She watched the cars move along the streets, people hurrying home, each one carrying their own story, their own silent battles. She remembered her mother's words from years ago, words whispered on a plane, hands squeezed tight. "You hold your head high, baby. They don't get to decide who you are." Those words had anchored her through every slight and every moment she'd been told to wait or fade into the background. Now she saw herself not as the girl who waited, but as the woman who stood her ground. The silence she'd once used as armor had become a force for justice, a way to demand respect without raising her voice. She thought of Maya, of Jasper, of every person who had found the courage to step forward because they'd seen her do the same. Kendra touched the glass, feeling the cool surface beneath her fingertips. She understood now that change didn't always come with noise or applause. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in a look, a nod, a story shared between strangers. Her phone buzzed behind her, another message of gratitude, another story of someone who had finally been seen. Kendra smiled, letting the warmth spread through her. She whispered to her reflection, "You did it. You really did." The city lights flickered, and for the first time in a long time, Kendra felt whole. Her presence, once overlooked, now cast a shadow of hope and dignity across the world outside her window. The company's new logo gleamed on the building's glass facade, a symbol of change born from struggle. Kendra walked past it each morning, feeling the weight and pride of what it now represented. Inside, the atmosphere was different. Staff greeted each other with genuine respect, old tensions replaced by a quiet sense of possibility. In the boardroom, a framed quote hung on the wall. "Dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right." Kendra paused beneath it, remembering the moment those words left her lips, how they'd echoed far beyond the tarmac. She knew her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every person who'd ever been told to wait, to be silent, to accept less. She sat at her desk, sunlight spilling across her papers, and closed her eyes for a moment of peace. The world outside buzzed with new stories, new challenges, but she felt ready. The battles she'd fought had left scars, but they also left her stronger, more certain of her place. As the day ended, the camera lingered on the logo. The city reflected in its surface. Kendra's voice, calm and resolute, filled the quiet. Sometimes the loudest justice is the one that needs no voice at all. She looked out at the world she'd helped change, not with anger or regret, but with hope. Her journey had started in silence, but it ended in a chorus of voices, each one stronger because she dared to be seen. In the end, Kendra's dignity, her restraint and her courage remind us change is possible, and sometimes the loudest justice comes in silence.